Hello everyone. There's been a lot of excitement in a lot of quarters about plastic eating worms. And today, I intend to explore these plastic eating worms, mealworms, superworms. How effective are they in breaking down these plastics? Are they the long-awaited solution to the plastic problem? And also, we'll be looking at a recent research that could be the solution to the plastic problem. So, mealworms, superworms. Exciting to realize that there are worms that can actually eat plastics, break them down, and save us of all the plastic problem. And talking about plastic problems, I don't think you need me to tell you how much of a problem the plastic situation is. A few numbers: 400 million tons of plastic. That's what we produce annually. To put that in perspective, so imagine, SUVs, it's those huge, fat, big cars that makes life difficult for everybody. So imagine over 133 million of them scattered around. That's how much plastic humans produce annually. Now, of those 400 million tons of plastic, only 9% of that ends up being recycled. 79% of that ends up in landfills, in bins, waste sites. And there they sit down, releasing chemicals into the environment. They get shredded through the elements, get washed into the sea, into water, where they harm fish and other organisms. So that's not a viable solution. 12% of that plastic gets incinerated, gets burnt, where it releases some other gases into the environment that ends up being problematic. And now, someone listening to me might say, but we do our best in recycling these plastics. Well, recycling. Let's talk a bit about recycling. I've just told you that only 9% of that plastic gets recycled. That's down to a number of reasons. The first reason being the challenges you face when you try to sort. So let's take it in steps. When you take your plastic and you drop it, the first thing that happens is these plastics have to be collected. So if you ask yourself, how many of us actually recycle the right way? The last time, I don't know the last time you looked at these things, but these recycling signs are a bit of a headache. So what goes where? What does what can you recycle at home? What has to be taken somewhere else to be recycled? That's the first stage of the problem. So there's a challenge with collecting these plastics for recycling. And then once they're collected, the next stage is for them to get sorted. Now, sorting means we need to separate these plastics into different types, different colors. Just to put that in perspective, so PET, one of the most used plastic. PETs always have this sign 100% recyclable. Now, how 100% is that recyclable? So, the first thing is, if you have a green PET and a clear PET, those two cannot be recycled together. So we must first separate them by color. So imagine the entire world collecting these plastics together and then having to sort them into types and into colors and into all of that. That then leads into the next question of, is that viable? Is that something in terms of cost? Now, it's very cheap to make new plastics. If you compare the whole trouble of sorting, and then after sorting, the next stage becomes cleaning. Now, the chemicals, toxic chemicals in these plastics, cleaning them and making them recyclable is again another challenge. So once they are collected, they are sorted, cleaned, the next thing they need to be reprocessed. So shredded into tiny bits, melted into beads that will then be processed or melted and molded into the shapes that we need. Now, if you consider all of the challenges you face in all of these phases, the question then becomes, is it viable? When it's so cheap to just use brand new produced plastics. So recycling is not that much of an easy thing. And so when we find worms that are able to break down plastics I think we can tell why people are getting really excited about this. And so, how exactly do these worms function? And does this whole plastic eating affect the worms or whatever those insects are? Now let's look at the insects. Mealworms, that's I think one of the first ones that was discovered to be able to eat plastics. And then recently we're also seeing superworms being part of the magic. These worms, both of them are actually larvae of beetles. So mealworm is a larva of the mealworm beetle, and superworm is also a larva of a beetle. Now, larva, yeah, I'll explain that in it. So most of these insects, like butterflies, they lay eggs. The eggs develop into a larva into pupa, and then the pupa into the adult insect. If we feed them these plastics, what happens to them? Does it affect how much do we end up destroying the insects as they eat these plastics, knowing that plastics are toxic? These are all questions that have been hanging. What's the mechanism by which these insects break these plastics? And so a recent research tried to answer some of these questions. And now research has gotten to a point where we can tell certainly that there are enzymes, bacteria, in the guts of these worms that allows them to be able to break down the plastics. Interestingly, they don't just shred the plastics such that they reduce them into microplastics and then end up still causing harm to the environment. They actually break the plastics into lower things like carbon dioxide. I think mealworms actually convert up to 47% of the polymers. They break the long chains actually, and they break down about 47% of the plastics into carbon dioxide, which obviously would be easier to manage. We know CO2 is also a greenhouse gas, but that would be a lot easier for us to manage than the plastics that we don't even know exactly what to do about them. So questions were around, is it possible for us to analyze the enzymes and the bacteria that do the job and find a way of engineering them and using them to actually do the work of plastic recycling? Another question is, does this whole plastic eating have an adverse effect on these insects? A recent research, I think the team of researchers from Queensland University took some superworms and grouped them, separated them into 3 groups. One group was fed styrofoam, which is plastic, actually just extruded polyethylene. Those every time you buy a package, although Amazon has been very great lately, and Amazon has been using recycling materials to do that job. But those plastics that are used to pad products when you buy them, those whitish plastics, yeah, that's styrofoam. Now, so a group was fed that plastic, another group was fed bran, and then a third group was actually left for 3 weeks. So in that period of 3 weeks, the third group was not fed anything at all. They were fasting basically. And the first interesting finding of this research is that all 3 groups, irrespective of what they ate or whether they did not eat at all, completed their life cycle. That means they went from larva to pupa to the adult. But the group that was fed plastic actually had some setbacks. The number that actually developed the pupa was a lot less than those that were fed the bran. Also, they were a lot thinner. They didn't grow as fat and fast as the other ones that were fed the bran. And so that is a pointer that this would actually cause harm to the insects. But the good news there is the research was also able to understand the mechanism through which these worms break down these plastics. And it's just down to some bacteria and some enzymes in their guts. And so they hope in this whole research is that we could actually get to a point where we isolate the bacteria, the enzyme with which they break down these plastics, find a way of engineering that, and then using that to deal with the plastic problem. Remember, like I said, up to 42 or 47% of the plastic was converted to carbon dioxide. That's a great achievement. The question now becomes scalability. How are we going to scale that up so that these wonder insects can begin to do the job that we need them to do? So hopefully I've done justice to the plastic eating worms, and let me know what you think in the comment section. Do you think this is a long-awaited solution to the plastic problem, or do you just think it's one of those overexcitement about something that's not leading anywhere really? And finally, thank you very much for watching. Remember, we have a responsibility to get the word out about the plastic problem, and not just the negative news about the environment. This is a positive development, so help spread the positivity by sharing and liking this video. Thank you once again, and see you again soon.